Dear students and audience, I welcome you all to this session on Politics of Environment, Unit 21, under TS5, Ecology, Environment and Tourism. Development in overall terms is good, but unfortunately it hampers the natural habitat in one way or the other. Making a balance between the two is the key, but unfortunately it seems difficult to attain with every passing day and year. With tourism, this interplay is even more evident as nature, flora and fauna, mountains, beaches form an integral part of this experience, but again are hampered in one way or the other. We'll try to dive deep on this very politics and interplay. After this session, you'll be able to better understand what is meant by politics of environment and its concerns, the environmental movements, the global context of it. We'll try to also learn about the nature of debate hovering around environment. We'll discuss some of the leading ecological movements that take part in India, locate the phenomena of tourism in politics of environment, and acquire a clue to the possible solutions to some of the problems described therein. Introduction. Environment is now a key component to international relations, and given the rising attention climate change receives in particular, a matter now that has high priority in diplomatic circles, with states in danger of disappearing below rising seas and major disruptions to natural resources, water supplies and food systems projected for future decades if steps to curb greenhouse gas emissions are not taken soon. Environmental matters have in fact become central to contemporary international politics. After the Cold War, environment emerged as a priority matter for scholarly analysis because scholars were concerned with matters of pollution, conservation and resources, but because there was an interesting analytical puzzle surrounding how the international system deals with them and changes resulting from introduction of new modes of governance, institutions, agencies, knowledge and norms emerged. The academia was focused more on study of political theories and ideas related to the environment. Number 2, environmental social movements, their effects on political parties and popular disclosures therein. This made good case studies for future campaigns, and the analysis of policy and its implementation on long-term effects on the environment at multiple levels. How all these aspects might be studied as international relations is also not a simple matter, but given their importance, they have increasingly impinged on great interest from the scholars. Critics who argue that environmental management arrangements that focus on technical matters frequently complicate process of global injustice and displacement of marginal populations in the global polity have challenged this narrow analytical focus and raised larger question of global power, justice and conflict. Whose environment? There is a very interesting example to prove whose environment it is. No doubt, man has claimed his ownership on every possible thing on the planet and beyond. We often come across people buying things like islands, lakes, land masses, mountains, hills, beaches and many more. All these assets then become their private property, which often they pass on to their successors, which implies that all of this in fact is inheritable in nature. The various nation states across the globe claim ownership over the water bodies surrounding their land territory as well as airstrips over their land, and the same continues to be owned by states for centuries and centuries. Today, each and everything which man can claim title over is owned by someone or the else. All the aforementioned things are components of the environment, the land, the hills, water bodies, soil, air, etc. Each of these components is inheritable. They may be passed on generations after generations. By this reason, it is not at all disputable or unclear that environment is inheritable, for what it can be inherited as private property can also be inherited as common property. Since the environment is commonly owned by each of us is under a duty which emerges from the entitlement or ownership of the environment. Being the common owners of the environment, each man has the same rights. But when all of us have the same rights, all of us are also under a duty to let others exercise their right as well. What is meant by this? That none of us has the right to possess, use, enjoy, alienate and destroy the environment in a manner by which others who also own the environment are stripped of or their right to do the same. This implies that our interaction with the environment in any matter should be conditioned by the obligation we have towards each member of the mankind. Interaction with the environment doesn't hinder theirs in any way. Hence, the need for protecting the environment is not due to the sake of environment itself, but because of the obligation we all possess as part of co-owners, cohabitants of this earth. The global context. To reiterate, global environmental problems such as global warming, ozone layer depletion, biodiversity loss, transboundary pollution, desertification, ocean acidification, harmful substance and waste disposal, among others, have been recognized. From the commencement of global environmental issues, efforts have consistently been made by the international community, including national governments, institutions, and non-government organizations, to effectively address and tackle those issues. Nonetheless, while efforts are being made to counter global environmental problems, it has become rather difficult to approach these problems through political solutions. Factors such as rapid and increasing number of multilateral environmental agreements and the fragmentation of environmental institutions, including its complexities, the lack of accountability, diverse interest in cooperation, and the challenges with regard to compromise, all lead to the reasons behind why global environmental problems are difficult to address through a common political consensus or solution. Phases of environment movement. In 1972, Anthony Doms developed the so-called Issue Attention Cycle (IAC) model. This model shows the 5 phases of public attention to an environmental problem: the pre-problem stage, the alarmed discovery stage, the stage of realizing cost of progress, the decline of public interest, and the post-problem stage. The IAC model has led to a description of the development of environmental movement in 3 periods of raised environmental consciousness in the 20th century. The first period of raised environmental consciousness began in 1900s and ended in 1910. In this period, the central aim of the environmental movement was to achieve a higher rate of environmental protection. There were no political movements or protest organizations that were anti-industrial or anti-capitalist. These organizations began to develop in the second period of raised environmental consciousness. The second period of raised consciousness started at the end of 60s and ended around 1973. It was the result of Silent Spring, the famous book by Rachel Carson, published in 62. In this book, Carson discussed environmental and health problems caused by pesticides, among other things. The publication of the book resulted in a widespread criticism on modern-day industrial and capitalism theories. The second period of raised environmental consciousness was mainly noticeable in the industrialized countries. In the middle class, small environmental organizations began to form, which were soon called NGOs. Theories such as Limit to Growth by the Club of Rome and Small is Beautiful by Schumacher led to widespread environmental discussion. Governments started introducing environmental legislation such as the Clean Air Act. In 1972, the first environmental conference took place in Stockholm, Sweden. The second period of raised environmental consciousness ended in 73 when the oil crisis took over. The third period of raised environmental consciousness started in 1987 with the publication of Brundtland Report titled Our Common Future. According to this theory, environment and economy should develop simultaneously, causing a decrease in economic pressure on the environment. Contrary to the second period of raised environment consciousness, the third period involved the developing countries in the process. International environment policy was also formulated. In 1992, the United Nations Conference on Environment and Development was held, leading to formulation of Agenda 21. The UNFCCC, better known as United Nations Conference on Climate Change, was also convened therein. Biodiversity became part of the international environmental agenda as well. Next slide, debate. To understand this very dilemma or debate, we try to give examples from our own country. Let's consider the environmental problems in India. It may be useful to compare and contrast certain environmental trends and concerns in India with those in the West, especially since the environmental crusade began in the West and many groups in India, including political parties, have for long dismayed it as a petty Western concept. The argument has always been that too much concern for the environment can only retard economic and industrial development. The UN Conference on the Human Environment held in Stockholm in 1972 was the landmark conference that created worldwide consciousness about environment. India's Prime Minister Indira Gandhi, who made a major impression on the conference, is still remembered for her often quoted statement, "Poverty is the biggest polluter." In all those who came from the third world, both leftists and rightists, there was a sneaking suspicion that the Western countries were up for some trick. The West may simply be punishing the environmental concerns onto the unsuspected third world to retard its technological modernization and industrial development. The debate of equity was totally missing from the international community then. But exactly 10 years later, when the UN organized a meeting to commemorate the Stockholm Conference, few NGOs from third world were prepared to argue in favor of the development process as it is. The third world today faces both an environmental crisis and a development crisis, as both these seem to be intensifying and interacting to reinforce each other. On one hand, there does not seem to be any end to the problems of inequity, poverty, and employment, the crucial problems that the development process is meant to solve. On the other hand, environmental destruction has gone further apace. We need to find the middle path. Next slide, interpretation. A consistent debate is going on as to who is responsible for the current state we all are in. Environment and nature matter to all, but no one wants to take an onus of the same. Utilization and appropriation of natural resources for their own development, as has been carried out by the Western world, is a reality known to one and all. Then came the nuclear waste, e-waste and routine waste dumping being carried out in the colonies of imperial world. Now, attending these world conferences on environment, the Western world points to developing countries to curb their emissions and come at par with them. Developing countries desire to ensure good healthcare, education, and energy to all to achieve sustained economic growth and poverty reduction. The disparity experienced in these regions is large and needs decades of hard work that still needs to be done. In this desire to develop and improve the standard of living of their citizens, these countries will opt for economic growth and better living for all. This might lead to environmental pollution and degradation to some extent. More so, energy access, industrial progress, infrastructure development is necessary to make the developing countries compete and contribute to the economic growth, job creation, and holistic development at their end. Unfortunately, going by the prevailing trajectory of growth, this has encouraged overconsumption, waste, and inefficiency, also fueling environmental pollution to some extent. On similar lines, in sub-Saharan Africa, depending mostly on natural resources for revenue and foreign exchange, these economies have been driven by funds generated from exploration of natural resources such as coal, oil and gas, agriculture and forest resources, gold, copper to name a few. The livelihood of the masses also depend on these resources. However, the exploitation and processing of some of these resources resulted in environmental pollution and degradation. For instance, the exploration of oil and the activities of multinational oil companies from Western world operating in the Niger Delta region of Nigeria has caused substantial land, water and air pollution. Similarly, in the case of timber mafia in Amazon and the tea plantation concept in East India as well. In conclusion, developing countries in their quest for economic development and poverty reduction are expected to put economic growth, energy for all and industrialization at the forefront of their goals before giving consideration to environmental issues. Therefore, compelling developing countries like those of Sub-Saharan Africa and South Asia needs to pursue environmental goals as well, particularly CO2 emission, as well as sustained substantial economic growth, technological advancement and financial support from developed countries, and the international community ought to compensate for the economic loss associated with reducing pollution. Therefore, beyond the point, it ceases to be a question of the developed countries versus developing countries and becomes an issue for the entire human race. It is in this sense that the environmental policy is truly a global politics which require a global perspective. Next slide. Politics of environment, the Indian context. The Indian path of development and associated conflicting view is no different from what has been observed in other parts of the world. We begin with environment versus development debate. The post-independent political debate in India has centered on two major issues, equity and growth. The environmental concern has added a third dimension of sustainability as well. India's biggest challenge today is to identify and implement a development process that will lead to greater equity, growth and sustainability in overall terms. The environment is not just pretty trees and tigers, threatened plants and ecosystems. It is literally the entity on which we all subsist and on which entire agricultural and industrial development depends. Development can take place at the cost of environment only up to a point. Beyond the point, it will be like the foolish person who has trying to cut the very branch on which he was sitting. Development without concern for the environment can only be short-term development. In the long term, it can only be anti-development and only can go at the cost of enormous human suffering, increased poverty and oppression. India may be rapidly approaching that point. Amongst the hundreds of voluntary groups working at the micro level in India, there has been a remarkable rapid growth of interest in environmental problems. So rapid has been this growth that sometimes it is loosely described as the beginning of an environmental movement in the country. We dive deep on some of these movements in the next slides. Chipko and Apiko movements. The Chipko movement. In the 70s, an organized resistance to the destruction of forests spread throughout India and better came to be known as Chipko movement. The name of the movement comes from the word embrace, as the villagers hugged the trees and prevented the contractors from felling them. It began in hills where the forests were the main source of livelihood, since agricultural activities cannot be carried out there easily. The Chipko movement of 73 was one of the most famous among these. The success achieved by this protest led to similar other protests in other parts of the country. One among the famous was Apiko movement. In the district of Uttar Kannada, southwestern India, local villagers faced similar attacks on trees as was done during the Chipko movement of Uttar Pradesh. Forest cover went from 81% in 50s to less than 25% in the 80s. Karnataka development of forestry opened logging of forests for Western Ghats, which spread across the state of Karnataka. The government proposed the construction of a pulp and paper mill, a plywood factory, and a chain of hydroelectric dams to control the rivers in the Western Ghats. Inspired by that Gandhian principle of non-violence and efficacy of Chipko movement in northern India, villagers decided to take matters into their hand. Led by Mr. Hegde, the group adopted the principle of Chipko campaign. Thus, Apiko campaign was launched in southwestern Indian state of Karnataka. After 38 days of non-violent obstruction by the villagers, the government finally withdrew orders to cut down the trees. However, villages and Mr. Hegde was not satisfied. The group wanted the government to stop all clean cutting in the whole state, not just in one particular area. Villagers rallied together, marched through the state, raising awareness about deforestation, and finally, across Karnataka in the 90s, there was a complete ban that took place. Across India, citizens have since launched new campaigns to protect further destruction of forests, rivers, and lakes. To dam or not to dam. There have been deep battles that have been fought in recent years between the adherents of the two perspectives over the construction of large dams. This has been the real bone of contention between the environmentalists and the developmentalists. The supporters of the dam point to the success of results of Bhakra Nangal Dam in fostering the Green Revolution in Punjab. The opponents have demonstrated some of the negative consequences of the Green Revolution in terms of depletion of fodder resources due to changing cultivation patterns and the ill effects of indiscriminate use of agrochemicals, fertilizers, pesticides on the health of people there. Thus, the focus is not to oppose indiscriminately, but the idea is to bring a certain environmental concern into the orbit of planning for dam construction. Also, ways have to be evolved to promote development as far as possible without destructing the environment with respect to its degradation. Environmental politics and tourism. One of the fundamental assumptions of underpinning the concept of sustainable tourism development is that there has been an increase in the environmental concern on the part of tourists and hence growing demand for responsible travel experiences. Certainly, the emergence of new tourists has long been predicted, and the number of surveys have suggested that tourist travel decisions are increasingly influenced by environmental concerns as well. However, some other research have also consistently demonstrated that tourism is relatively immune to environmental concerns. For example, in the recent poll, just 1% of tourists stated that their carbon footprint was as important factor when deciding on a holiday purchase, whereas cost is the most important consideration for something like 50% of the tourists. Even despite the growing awareness on climate change, research has shown that there is having little or no impact on travel behavior. For example, one study found that the few people who expected to fly less frequently in the future would do so as a result of a change in personal circumstances rather than because of concern for environmental impacts of aviation. Thus, despite the long-held belief that tourists are demanding greener holiday, the evidence suggests that environmental concerns remains low on their list of priorities when purchasing holidays or travel experiences. Thus, in short, there is still a significant gap between idealism of the concept of tourism development and reality of tourism in practice, especially on the political front. There are numerous examples of good practices, but still there is something that lot of need to be done as far as sustainable tourism development is concerned. It is therefore a need to re-examine the relationship between tourism, its roles as an agent of development, and its potential environmental consequences within the broader framework that is permitted by the conceptual principles of sustainable development. In other words, the impasse reached in tourism development suggests that it is time to move beyond its restrictive, marginalized ideas and time to explore tourism and political development within the contemporary global political, economic and environmental framework. To sum up, the politics of environment started from the late 60s and culminated into a global environmental movement in the 70s and 80s of the 20th century. The movement, initiated mainly in the West, started with local concerns, but in its second phase acquired a global perspective. We became familiar with the different political perspectives on the question of environment and its relationship with development. We also became familiar with the global context of India and discussed some of the ecological movements like Chipko and Epico. It is focused on essence of the debate between environmentalists and the propagation of development in a holistic manner. We also highlighted the importance of this debate for the tourism industry. As a parting exercise, please try to find answers to what are the different positions on the question of environment and development. Write different environmental movements in India and their results in the short and long run. Write a note on India's tourism, politics and sustainable development relationship. Thank you very much for being a part of this concourse. Thank you so much.